Welcome to the Outdoor Biz podcast, your home for inspiring conversations with outdoor insiders. Each week, author, speaker, adventurer, and outdoor industry veteran Rick Saez talks in depth with iconic brand founders, sales and marketing pros, product designers, and industry rising stars. Listen in when Rick's guests offer actionable advice to land your ideal industry gig and grow your outdoor career. Catch us again when the conversation shifts to the hottest outdoor products, destinations, and the latest industry insights. And now, here's Rick.
Hey everyone, happy Thanksgiving to those of you in the U.S., and welcome to episode 356 of the Outdoor Biz podcast. We're taking some downtime this week, so please enjoy this replay of our most popular episode of 2022, number 333, with Rock Fight LLC founder and Polartec's Layers podcast host, Colin True. We'll be back next week with episode 357, featuring Ian Miller, founder of Unique Ascent in Donegal, Ireland. Ian says they provide fundamentally two services. The first is a unique and extensive guiding service, and the second is a mountain training service in which they provide mountain training courses and assessments. Talk to you next week. Welcome to the show, Colin.
Thanks for having me, Rick. Really excited to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be, I'm looking forward to this conversation because we've talked offline a couple times about not only podcasting in the outdoor industry, but all kinds of things. And I think this, we have our standard questions that we'll work through, but this could go in a number of different areas and maybe off the rails, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I love going off the rails. Let's go off the rails.
We'll see. We might. So let's start with how you were introduced to the outdoors. I always love to hear that answer from people.
Yeah, I was the prototypical kind of 80s, 90s poser, that's when we get into like why I'm actually here. Like that's a word we use a lot in the show I produce. But I did a little Boy Scouting. My older brother got his Eagle Scout. I grew up in kind of southeast Pennsylvania, about an hour west of Philadelphia. My family was not outdoorsy. Outdoorsy to us was going to play backyard football. We had woods behind our house, so we'd go out and like tromp around in the woods and that kind of stuff. But like my dad liked to camp, my mom didn't, so that meant we never really went camping. And then, as we got into the 90s and sort of the extreme movement started having its day, and I started inline skating and, the outdoors became really cool. I started, got my first fleece vest, at Eastern Mountain Sports and thought I was, badass, wearing it with my Timberland, my Nike hiking boots.
Right.
But then at some point, I think if you're doing the kind of poser thing, you do have to look yourself in the mirror and be like, am I actually who I'm presenting myself to be? And so I actually started doing the thing, and I moved to New Hampshire in my early 20s and then ended up, hiking and sea kayaking. And before you know it, I'm like, hey, I really like this. And that's,
how'd you get into the industry? Did you have did you work retail? Retail. Okay. Yeah.
I was a retail guy. Yeah. So
we all did, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. I still think it's one of the best ways to learn anything.
Yep.
I worked at a few fashion brands in between some outdoor retail stints. Structure, shout out to Structure. If anyone remember Structure, I think it's Express for Men now. But yeah, I dropped out of college to pursue a career in radio, which doesn't make any sense. I should have just changed schools or something like that. But I wanted to be a DJ, and it's about 1995. Ended up working at Play It Again Sports, which then. Thought this is way more fun than trying to do another thing that sounds really hard. And so just kind of ended up sticking in retail and ended up at Eastern Mountain Sports, the same shop where I got my first fleece. And that led to my first corporate gig at Timberland in the early 2000s as a customer service manager. And yeah, like you said, the retail career sparks a lot for a lot of people, I'm sure. That's
come up with a lot of people too. When we get to the end and I ask everybody about the advice, everybody says, you work retail because it sets you up for success down the road because you get, on the ground information and education from salespeople, from reps, from customers. What the customer is looking for. So it's like a master's degree in outdoors, I think. It's awesome.
I agree. I think you're crossing over with supply chain. So you have to see what logistics are about, what manufacturing is about. If you're working for a brand that makes goods, you work with the sales team. You maybe get to dabble with the marketing and then a little bit with the product folks. But even if not, typically, like if you're in customer service and you have an interest in product, well, that means you can use internal hires are usually what a lot of people do with these companies, right? So
yeah,
there's a path to do just about anything coming out of customer service.
yeah, that's a good way to get in. So tell our listeners a little bit about Rock Fight. What do you do, and how does it work? I was on your website the other day. The name is well. The name is interesting because I wondered if it was climbing or what, so I wanted to go look and your story about it just brought me back to my childhood and all the rock fights we got in the neighborhood. It was awesome.
Well, that was it. I mean, that was kind of the inspiration. And it's a little, after 20 plus years of working in corporate America, you kind of learn that everything is a rock fight.
Sometimes.
It felt like a really good name for a company. Even though if I'm doing things mostly on my own, you still kind of get your own rock fights. But
right.
At the last 12 or 13 years of a 20-year career were a lot of jobs, a lot of travel. And I burned out pretty hard. I probably would have burned out earlier if I'd been working in a different industry. Always great to, if there's some level of combining what you like to do in your spare time with your work, it kind of keeps the passion alive a little longer. But, at some point when you're on an executive team of a brand, it does kind of, like we were talking about before you hit record, it becomes corporate bullshit. I'm not sure if we can swear on this podcast. It does. Okay. Well, and I was really lucky that I was in a position where I could take a break and kind of evaluate what I wanted to do next. And I don't blame the industry. I don't blame where I was working. It was a path I put myself on. I worked hard to get there. And 20 years is a long time to be doing anything.
Yeah.
And I kind of discovered, this is about 3 or 4 years ago, that in the 20 years since I left school to be a DJ, this thing called podcasting had developed with a much lower barrier to entry than becoming a disc jockey was.
Yeah,
in 1995.
zero. Just turn on your mic and start talking.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know I'm jumping ahead from some of the things you sent me in our outline, but I started a couple pods on my own just to see if I could do it. And that was what the 2 podcasts were: Movies I Missed, which I love movies. Second to outdoorsy stuff, I really enjoy watching movies, but because I have a lot of interest in kids and everything, you missed some along the way. So I'd watch a movie I'd missed that had a good reputation or a bad reputation and kind of give my thoughts on it. And another one called 20 Minutes of Truth, which was more just a kind of a commentary on whatever I felt like talking about in interviews with friends or interesting people. But it was a task of can I hit upload once a week?
Gotcha.
So to kind of record, edit, learn that, learn the value of editing, learn the value of multiple takes, those things. And it really kind of sparked, it scratched the itch and was creative and different and new. And so I decided to start a little company around it. So it still pretty much just supports me. I'm not currently taking on clients for all.
Oh, okay.
People.
So just for your podcast.
This is just me right now.
Gotcha. But you only produce, so we'll talk about the Layers podcast here in a minute, but is that the only show that you produce under Rock Fight right now?
Right now, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I thought you still had the other 20 Minutes of Truth and Movies I Missed.
I pulled them down when Layers launched because I used a lot of unlicensed movie clips.
Oh.
And I think it's okay the way I was doing it, but I didn't really feel like, and it's just, and also it was, we'll kind of describe it as if that was my undergrad work.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you go back and listen to episode 1 of your podcast. I'm sure you'll know, right? It's kind of, it's a little rough.
Oh yeah.
So I just felt like, hey, here's an opportunity. Let's just start fresh. And so I still have all of them. And I've thought about, I kind of releasing some of the better ones just on a separate feed just to put them out there, but I'm not sure if I'm going to do that or not. But
yeah, you could redo both of those shows and relaunch them. That way you could, maybe delete or figure out how you can get away with that unlicensed stuff. But yeah, I think they're both viable. And these days, geez, as well as I do, you go search for podcasts, they're on anything. And there's a lot of really great, there's a lot of garbage out there, but there's a lot of really great, well-produced, interesting shows. It's amazing.
Interesting thing about podcasts, right? There is a lot of garbage because anybody can do it. And I don't want to discourage anybody for trying or be, shit on anybody who's doing it. Good for you.
It's like anything. You look at a lot of photography. People put photography sites up there and go, "Guy, you need to do a little more Lightroom on that one. Learn Photoshop. Come on, man." That's right. That's just the nature of learning anything.
2-hour podcast where they clearly just press record and then press upload. It's like you got to listen to it 5 or 6 times and be brutal with those cuts.
Got to have a plan. Got to have a plan.
Totally. And I think, I really liked a lot of the pods that I produced. I think I probably will at some point. And I probably will bring them back too, because Layers is looking like it's going to be, we're taking a very slow process with it and just really want to invest a lot in Layers episodes. So kind of in between, I was getting a little itchy the other day, actually. I'm like, I kind of want to record something,
Oh, right. Yeah.
So
right,
maybe I'll bring them back. But
yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah. So you produce and host the Layers podcast presented by Polartec. Tell us about that.
Well, one of the best parts, and I know at the end we're going to talk a little bit about how to get in the industry, but one great thing once you've had some time in the outdoor industry is you tend to make a lot of contacts, and the contacts you make are not just business only. They're people that you tend to value in your life. I think that's one of the better parts of the outdoor industry, are the kind of the long lasting relationships you make. And even though I hadn't been at Polartec for some time, I still had a lot of great contacts there. And as I was forming Rock Fight, I was in some conversations with them around doing some video projects, actually. This is pre-pandemic, just kind of chatting with some folks I knew over there, let them know what I was doing. And I think they were kind of wanted as almost like as a consultant basis. And then when the pandemic shut everything down, I told them like, well, hey, we could still do a podcast and pretty much remotely. Didn't have to do any travel no location scouting or in-person shooting, to do a podcast. And they were open to it. And it evolved probably like most great media projects. It took a lot of twists and turns, and took probably about 18 months from the time we really started talking about doing a podcast to the time we actually released the show this past January. But it was a really fun project to dig into, and Polartec was a great partner because they were always on board with making sure that, look, they want some credit, they're paying for this thing, but they also don't need it to be an infomercial. Don't want people to walk away going, well, thanks for the 20-minute, commercial.
That's so smart. That's exactly how to do it. Yeah.
Well, and they also were not worried about, do we need to get other people to pay for it and other sponsors, and then worry about what they want to do. And, we kind of tapped into is there's a lot of great podcasts, and give credit to the people who are doing it in the outdoor space. I mean, yourself for sure. You've been doing this for a while now.
Thank you.
You got I think the podfather of the outdoor industry is probably Fitz Cahall, in the Dirtbag Diaries, right?
Right.
There's some great shows, but I think there are, just like an issue with podcasting in general, there's a lot of the people who are just pressing record and pressing upload, and maybe it would have been an interesting conversation if it was a 10-minute podcast. Did we need an hour of that? So what our goal was to create something that was very interesting, that was unique. You can be three things, right? You can be first in something, you can be the best at something, or you can be different if people are already doing those things. Shout out to Mike Barrett, my friend in marketing, who taught me that. And I think we weren't going to be the first podcast. We weren't even going to be the first narrative podcast, although narrative podcasts exist. But we could be different. And what stories could we tell that kind of fit in the DNA of Polartec and fabric and things that they make, but also, things maybe you don't really know about, the untold sort of stories, and so the first season was the rise of dressing down, which is kind of, how did sportswear become our daily driver? And that was happening well before the pandemic hit.
Oh, yeah, long time.
Right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you can wear joggers and Vans to a wedding if you do it right, and look good doing it. Why? And you start peeling back the layers. Not to put find a point on it, but it's, that's a result of a lot of these fabric technologies and these brands who are adopting these fabric technologies. Well, how did that all happen? Because, as of 89 was when things really started to get going. That's not that long ago, to a point where you and I go walking through our house right now, how many fleece items would we find, right? Well, that fabric didn't exist 40 years ago, right? That's kind of crazy. And, as we learned, you kind of go back to then how does the industry start, and how do these things start getting created? And it kind of created a really interesting story to tell. And so that's kind of what we want to do with Layers is really tell interesting stories, that are definitely targeted toward the outdoor industry, but that even if you're adjacent, like my wife, who is not nearly as much of an outdoors person as me, but enjoys going outside, enjoys doing these things, she still enjoyed learning about these things, listening to the show.
Well, and that is so smart, because I think we've talked, when we were setting up this podcast, and we've talked a couple times, and even before we hit the mic button, and I've talked with a bunch of other people about this, the podcasting opportunity in the outdoor space. And I think Polartec, it sounds like there's a couple of people that have, a handful of people that have nailed it. And I think the opportunity is you guys have sort of created this NPR type Polartec thing. And I think that's exactly the opportunity for every brand out there, whether you want to do one show or 5 shows. Every brand has so many stories to tell about their history, about their product, about their people. And that's the aim of my show, is just to share all these stories. I think that's what causes the people to listen, is because everybody wants to hear everybody else's story. We love to hear how so-and-so did this or so-and-so did that. And for brands, that can take a million different avenues. And I think that's where the future opportunity lays. And I think people should jump on it soon, because it's the sky's the limit. And we've already known, after the pandemic, your voice is your superpower. So start using it.
The brands, and this might be a controversial take, but I don't currently work for a brand right now, so I don't mind making it. I'm not going to be interviewed.
There's been a handful of controversies talked about on the show, so don't worry about it.
All right. I think the brands who deserve the credit for us having $1 billion outdoor industry, right? Whether intentionally or accidentally, whatever, they did all the lifting that got us here. But I think they're rapidly, from a storytelling point of view, and even honestly from a product point of view, they're kind of rapidly getting left behind.
I think their stories are just not getting as widespread as they would if they had a podcast. They're still telling the stories. They're doing it through print. They're doing it through other medias. But man, podcast is it's the equalizer. Everybody can listen to it.
Could not agree. And the best part of podcasts, I do it every single day. Not with my own show, but like I'm making coffee, I'm cleaning the house, and I get to listen to stories.
Yep.
And it's a great. If you like documentaries, if you like interesting conversations, you can do it on the go and whenever, and it's at your fingertips. It's not scheduled. It's not like, listening to a radio program.
Yep.
But what I mean about, I think the industry and the brands, it's, some of the best storytellers are our brands, but I also feel like the best stories being told, be it a podcast or a video on YouTube or whatever, are not being told by a lot of the brands anymore. I think there's still this sort of adherence to the kind of the hardcore nature of the sports, the kind of 1990s sort of vibe of, and I'm casting a wide net here. I know not everybody's doing it this way, but I think the best stories that are being told now are the ones that are more welcoming. How do we get more people to participate? And that's a thing we tried to touch on with the third episode that we did of Layers of the Outdoors Are for Everyone. It's, how did all of this innovation and all this technology and kind of solving problems that increase safety and the ability to stay outside longer, and then ultimately let us be more comfortable on our daily lives, and how has that opened up, inviting more people to participate in what we know to be this incredible lifestyle, which is going outdoors and doing, and our lives are so much more fulfilled because we get to do these things. And then you click on a website and you still see that they're selling a new t-shirt based off the technical attributes of that website. It's like of that garment or the fabric. And it's like, yeah, we know stuff works.
Yep.
Yeah. It's worked for a while now.
Yeah.
But I agree with you though, the podcast thing. And I think a lot of people just think like you can pop somebody in front of a microphone and have a podcast. I don't have to tell you, it's not that simple, right?
Right.
It's a lot of work that goes into doing it the right way.
In order to do a good one, I mean, you have to prep your guest, you have to prep yourself, all those things. Yeah. And I think the Dirtbag Diaries is one of those shows that is the stories they tell are fantastic. And I think more people can do those kind of things. Yeah. And forgive me if I don't listen to all the podcasts out there. So if I'm missing your show, reach out to me and let me know, and come on my show and talk about your show. That's another way to get the word out. So, but there's a lot of good 100%. Ones out there, but yeah.
Always looking for new podcasts, especially Friday afternoon when no one's uploaded. I need a few good ones for my run this weekend,
right. Yeah. Well, you run out of episodes of your favorites. Like, oh man, they're not going to drop for another week. What am I going to do? So you are all in on podcasts. We talked about why we both feel they're so valuable. What part of podcasting, the actual energy you put into your podcast, what part of that do you like the most?
In terms of producing it?
Yeah, producing it, thinking about it, creating it. What's your favorite part of that? All the things, right? Not necessarily the recording segment, but all the things. From the time you decide on an episode to the time you hit the publish button, which one of those many things do you love the most? Yeah,
the recording may actually... as satisfying as it is when you're finished, it may be the worst part of it, especially.
It's nerve-wracking because you wonder, shit, is the button pushed? Did I got a card in there? I've done that about 3 times now. All done and got nothing.
I've definitely done that. And then I've also, we really valued the production value, considering this was a narrative podcast. So we were in a studio with an engineer and our director, and it's, say that again, say it this way. And then, so I can't pronounce the word for what, and then it's just like, it was that performance thing. I know you're dabbling into performance stuff too. So it's like, you understand, like, I'm not getting this. And then you get in your own head and like, you're never going to get this.
Right. Right.
The best part, I feel like, is the writing and the story cracking. I have a really great collaborative partner in David Karstadt, who's the VP of marketing at Polartec. He and I know each other a long time. The main reason I was able to work with those guys again, he was our creative director when I was running sales and marketing for North America there. Mm-hmm. And he's a wonderful creative guy, wonderful writer. He's the one who directs the episodes too. But we have this we fall into this great rhythm of, I kind of put together, what do I want to talk about, who I'm going to talk to, do a bunch of stuff. Then we meet, I give it to him. He pokes a bunch of holes. Then I go back and kind of bring it back and forth to him until we start actually then writing the episodes. But, I do feel like there is an air of authenticity with the show, because I would say I'm going to put 65%, 70% of every episode of Layers so far, the first 3, and now we're developing season 2. So we've got 3 more in the works, and I would say it goes to that as well. All my best ideas have come while I've been out trail running.
Interesting. Yeah, makes sense.
You turn off the podcast, you turn on the music, or just have nothing, and all of a sudden the wheels just start turning better, right? Yeah, I gotta, my dog hates it, because then all of a sudden I stop. I'm like, tell her to sit, and I'm sending myself an email before I lose my thought.
Right, I do that all the time. Yeah.
And it's just that great feeling, and then come home and then kind of develop that. I mean, writing is something I was always interested in doing. And then, coming from the generation of, World War II parents who were basically, you don't want to be a writer. You just need to go to school so you can eventually get a job and buy a house and get married. And not that that's what they knew. We have a wonderful relationship with my parents, but
that's a great thing to do still. If that's your path, do it. I'm all for it. Just wasn't for me. Yeah.
I think, I always wondered, like, could I have been a writer? And like, that was my proudest achievement, I feel like, of the pods I've done so far, is I feel like they're well written. And that's kind of where, that's definitely my favorite part.
Yeah, they're well written and well produced. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's another thing maybe people don't understand about podcasts too. Like, so Layers and the other shows I've done are narrative podcasts where you actually write a script and, and where the elements go and everything. But even this show that we're on, you write the show, I would assume, right?
Yep. I'm staring at it right now. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you have intro, outro. Then you're going to have to do the whole framework of the conversation.
I usually do the intro, outro after. Actually, I have the same outro for everything.
Yeah.
I quit doing all the fancy stuff on the outro, but the intro I write later, because I get what I'm going to say in the intro from the conversation. But the conversation is written out. I'm staring at it on the screen right now. Yep.
But I think the art forms is still really being defined. And I think, obviously you and I are both excited about it.
Yeah.
Right.
We're in the second inning of this thing.
There are people probably out there who understand it all what it is, don't know what it is, people who undervalue what it is. My brother, I totally forgot. I sent him, we launched the show. I'm all proud of it. Sent it to my mom,
Yeah.
The podcast. My one brother, I have 2 brothers, wrote back and said, is this worth me listening to? I didn't tell him it was mine. I said, hey, take a listen to this. And he said, is this worth me breaking my streak of never having listened to a podcast before? And I said, yes.
Yeah, just pick one, dude, at this point. Yeah, exactly. Wow.
The first podcast you ever heard was mine.
Good.
But I think it's a very, like I said, there's people who are crushing it, and there's people who are just doing it as a hobby. It's kind of the most democratic form of media, I feel like, that we've ever had right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's why I say your voice is your superpower, because I think there's nothing like the human voice and your voice telling your story, and the inflection and the emotion and the sound and all those things. And then the other thing is, like you just mentioned, I mean, I have a bunch of family members myself who don't listen to podcasts. That's why I say we're only in the second inning of this thing, because you look at all the people in the world and you look at, all the downloads that people are getting. Joe Rogan's getting thousands of downloads. There are still millions of people that aren't listening to podcasts. So there is so much opportunity and so much, who knows where this is going to go. It's amazing.
I did I know you have to edit this out probably, but I did for the folks at Polartec who were owned by Milliken, so they had some statistics This is and it's another thing without sort of a Nielsen, it's really hard to find. I'm sure you've done this too, right?
It's really hard.
Data.
Yeah.
So
and downloads, you get a lot of numbers, but you really don't know. Like you get a spike in downloads. Okay, why did that happen? Was that really the show, that episode that good, or was it somebody discovered it? It's that stuff's also it's getting better, but.
Because I took when I was developing when I started developing layers, and I just really put the brakes on the other two podcasts, and then all of a sudden I log back into Anchor, and it's like 2,000, and I'm like, and when I had left it, it had like 600. I'm like, what?
Right?
happened?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
Shoot, I should be uploading. What's going on? But Podcast Insights in December 2021 said there's over 2 million podcasts in existence, which is active and non-active. So people just started one and didn't follow up on it. They're counting those, and over 48 million episodes. And then the other one I thought was interesting from Nielsen, actually, I guess they do report on podcasts, is that this is in 2020, 75% of the population in the US is familiar with the term podcasting. 55% of the population, so it's 155 million people, had listened to a podcast in 2019. 37%, 104 million people had listened to a podcast in the last month, and 24%, 68 million people listen to podcasts weekly. And it's like, you see those numbers go down, but I'm like, well, $68 million, that's still more people than watch the Super Bowl on a weekly basis are listening to podcasts. To your point about the second inning, yeah. Right? I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah. I had Rob Waltz from Libsyn on the show back on episode 310. And Libsyn's who I host my show with, and they do a podcast called The Feed, which is all about those kinds of things, the latest trends and numbers, all those things. And he's been podcasting since it started. I mean, way back in the day. He talks about the early days of podcasting, and so they're all in on that. And it's interesting to hear him talk about the history and what the opportunity is. So I just can't. I'm with you. I'm all in, and I think it's a great equalizer too, because everybody can. There's nothing like hearing the story from the people that created the story that were there, right? No shit, right. There I was. And so-and-so's telling the story, and it's right from the horse's mouth. And there's no, I don't know, no pomp and circumstances, no fakeness. It's just really authentic. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was one of those, I was a podcast nerd. I was like, oh, too bad this is an outdoor podcast because I want to listen to him talk about statistics.
Well, and some of those shows, when you do get into the weeds on podcasting, it gets a little wonky, but only guys like you and I like it. But that's for someone just starting out, that can be good too. You can go in and
totally
figure out, do I really want to do this? Because some people it's not for, like you say, there's a lot of effort that goes into it. It's not like the CB hobby of the day back in the day when we were kids.
Right. I remember when I decided I was going to do it, signed up, I bought a microphone, the whole thing, and I got ready to go. It was recording in GarageBand, which I still do.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I pressed record, and I was going to, I'm like, what am I going to say? And I'm like, okay, hold on. I stopped recording.
Yeah.
Then I went back and wrote down what I wanted to say. I'm like, oh, is this how this is going to work? Like, yeah, this is how this is going to work.
And back then, like I started the same way. Now there's so much education and things out there, free and coach. You can hire a coach. You can hire me. You can hire a lot of people to help you get started. But it's a better starting place. And for those of you youngsters out there, CB refers to CB radios. If you're not as old as I am, so. Let me clarify that.
My oldest brother we had an antenna sticking out the side of the house, and he had a CB, and we would go in there and we would try and prank truckers, and that was a fun activity in 1981 or whatever it was.
It was in the late 70s. I was never into it, but I had a buddy, one of my high school buddies. He had a big old antenna sticking out of the top of his orange Pinto wagon. It was like, whoa, okay, all right. So, do you have any shows in the queues that you can talk about? Any episodes or?
We have been approved for season 2.
Cool.
We are credit again to Polartec. They're letting, it's hard. I would like to be uploading regularly. I think they really like the format. They like what we did. So we're going to do, it looks like 3 more episodes, hopefully coming out by the end of the year. And the theme and exact episode, I don't want to tease something that ends up being completely different, because if I had been this far along the last time, it would have radically different than what we actually launched the show with. But it'll definitely continue that theme of, the kind of the untold stories of the industry. What's something that is, when you mentioned that sort of NPR style, like Radio Lab, This American Life, those style podcasts definitely were influences on what we wanted to do here. And, just if you've spent time in the industry, this will pique your interest. And even if you haven't, if you're at all familiar with outdoor clothing, you probably will like it too.
Cool.
So,
awesome.
Yeah, but we'll be back. Lairs is coming back.
I look forward to listening to that. We're going to take a little break and give some love to our sponsor, the running event. I'll be heading to Austin, Texas this November 29th through December 1st for the running event, and I hope you'll join me. If you're unfamiliar with the running event, also known as TRE, it's an annual conference and trade show that brings together performance brands like Brooks, Hoka, and Garmin with local running stores from across the U.S. and even globally. It's a great opportunity for these brands and retailers to connect and check out the new products. What I'm really excited about, though, is that this year, TRE is expanding into the outdoor industry with a brand new space called Switchback. I'm going to let TRE event director Christina Henderson share a little more.
Hey, thanks, Rick. I'm glad you'll be joining us at TRE this year. So obviously, the running event has always been really focused on running retailers and brands. But especially over the last few years, we're seeing the lines blur between run and outdoor industries. Trail running and hiking have grown tremendously, and we're seeing companies like Ultra and Nike putting a lot of focus into their trail lines. TRE has always had a lot of brands that sell into outdoor specialty, but Switchback marks the first time we're truly dedicating a space at TRE to connect run and outdoor specialty.
Well, I'm looking forward to checking it out this year. If you're interested in heading to Austin for Switchback at TRE, you can find the link to registration in the show notes and use code OutdoorBizTRE. That's OutdoorBizTRE for special discount pricing. And if you're curious about exhibiting at the event, reach out to Christina. Her email is chenderson@divcom.com. That's CHENDERSON. And that'll also be in the show notes. Now let's get back to the show. Are there any shows in your brain that you'd like to see published? Anything in your head running around that, somebody needs to do a show on this, somebody needs to do a show on that? A couple of highlights?
Another like a
podcast.
Somebody
yeah.
should start.
Yeah.
What am I not hearing? I really like when, and this is where Patty O'Connell had a show called Safety Third. It's the outdoors is a look. I fall into the trap sometimes if you go on YouTube or you listen to a podcast or whatever, and it's all about this sort of hardcore running event or whatever, and it's like, and sometimes, but usually if it's thin on story, then it's told pretty quick, and it better be a short video or a short episode. If it's just about the event, you still need to have a story. And so the best stories are the ones, that kind of are human interest stories. And then the outdoors plays this great role in that. So I think that there's still a lot of stories to tell because there's still a lot of people out there.
Oh my God, there's unlimited stories to tell. There's being made every day. There's stuff to tell that's been done and stuff to tell that we haven't even thought of yet.
I think if you listen to Lairs in the third episode, we had a guy named Manny Rodriguez, aka Bodega, who is one of the Panza Boys, which is a group of heavy set runners of color in New York City. They've had some attention because it's a kind of a definitely an empowering movement towards people who you necessarily don't think of when you think of running. And I'd love to see those guys, just chatting on a show. I think that'd be one where a little bit more of a Jesus and Marrow kind of, like just free flowing. Let's just press record and let these guys go. That would be a fun one. I think the outdoor industry is short on good podcasts. Again, like Rick said, if there's one I'm missing, please send it to me too. But I think instead of just a podcast about running, that's about running shoes and the race that's coming up. It's like, well, let's talk about why do people run? How did their life bring them to this point? Let's talk to kids who like to run. I don't know.
It's unlimited. Yeah, it's unlimited. Yeah, it's just,
bring the human element of it into it.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of the outdoors and the outdoor industry. It's all got that human connection. I think that's what makes it such a strong, tight community. So
yeah, and it's not anyone's fault. I get it. If your favorite thing in the world is activity and you want to do a podcast about it, then that's the default, right? It's like, hey, I want to talk about bikes.
Oh, definitely. Talk about what you know.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah. Talk
But
about what
just know the most interesting one, then you're only speaking to your core, like the core user, right? If you want to invite more people in, find ways to, highlight other people, in their stories.
Right. And you'll know right away if you get a bunch of downloads, it was a winner. If it doesn't, you go back to the drawing board. Let's shift gears a little bit. What outdoor activities do you still participate in? You get any rock fights?
No rock fights lately.
All right.
Yeah. Historically, I've tried most of the sports, not including like bungee jumping or jumping out of airplanes. I haven't quite got there yet, but all the snow sports, everything, ice climb, rock climbing. But currently, it's trail running, like I mentioned earlier. That's like breathing to me. It's such a, talk to my wife. If I need to go for a run, she'll let you know. She can tell when Colin needs to go for a run. Surfing, which I started doing when I was 39 or 40, and especially now living in Southern California, that's been nice to increase my opportunity to get out in the ocean. And it's such a cliche, but it is sort of more like the more spiritual kind of fulfilling things in my life, like just that, and not from a even from a higher power point of view, but just the idea that I can drive somewhere, I can't take my phone. If I just do nothing but sit on my surfboard in the water for 35 minutes and don't even catch a wave, I never come back you never come back disappointed, and that's the beauty of surfing. And then mountain biking is probably I would consider my pastime. I still love mountain biking. It's really, really fun. I've had the opportunity to live in 8 different states, usually northern climates. This is my first time in a more southern climate. When I grew up in Pennsylvania, we never got enough snow. That's one reason I moved to New England, because it didn't snow enough. And then I started snowboarding when I got to New England. Then we moved. I lived in Utah for 4 years in Park City. And then we got all the snow, and I thought it was the greatest thing. And I skied all the time and everything. Then we moved to the Northwest, and I discovered that, hey, actually it's okay not to have snow in your yard and your driveway, but it's really close. So it's like an hour away, and living in the west side of the Cascades. And then coming down to Southern California, I realized that listen, I think snow is great. And if once a winter I can find my way to maybe get a few turns or stand on snow, I'm good. But I like running on dirt and biking on dirt and being in shorts. And
it's not bad. It's not bad. Yeah, it's a good climate.
But there's fun things to do everywhere. That's the thing I learned moving all over the country. Don't let people shit on your town just because it's not one of those, using air quotes, towns, right?
Exactly. So, yeah. You could find something to do any place. Yeah.
You got it.
Do you have any suggestions or advice for folks wanting to get into the outdoor biz?
Well, like we talked about, retail for sure. Mm-hmm. Even if you, I know folks who had their MBAs and still went and worked retail. It's a great path to, because we talked about with customer service and how you can get to know the other facets of the business. Retail is the same thing. If you pay attention to the owner, understand how the business of it works. And then at some point, the reps and all the people coming in, you're going to get exposure to the brands, and that's a pathway into the brands. If you're in CS, if you're in customer service, I would say then the next step, and the role that I still probably valued the most in my outdoor career, was as a tech rep. I got to be a tech rep for 3 years, I think it was. I was at Timberland. This is early 2000s. Timberland had just acquired Smartwool. And they had launched 2 outdoor footwear brands. One was Go Light Footwear. Another one was this brand called My Own, which they developed with Martin Keene, who developed Keene. And then obviously the Timberland outdoor line. And that was great. Now, some of that may have been that I was working for Timberland and they were a big company. So we had a lot of resources, but it was just, that role was really fun. Working with retailers, going into shops, going to events, getting paid to go on, do a lot of adventure-y things. It was encouraged to hey, this summer, go and do stuff. Take pictures of you doing stuff. Here's the new shoe. Go wear the shoe. And that was a great spot. And those are coveted roles. But I think the path of retail to customer service to tech rep is actually that's a path.
That's a good suggestion.
Sure.
Yeah, that's good advice. Yeah. What's your favorite outdoor gear purchase under $100?
Well, I thought for a while on this one, and I
think this is the hardest question I ask. I've said that before. Everybody stumps everybody.
It really is. And because, especially as we learned that, invest in your gear and spend a little bit of money, it'll last longer, all those sorts of things. The $100 mark, And I think I've heard people say like, headlamps, and headlamps a good answer. Actually, I know headlamps is a good answer because every year I feel like I have to buy 10 new headlamps because then I go camping with my kids all summer and they just somehow
you can never find them. Right. Exactly.
So kids
I have no kids and where's my headlamp?
But I got to throw a brand called ProBar. ProBar I worked for in the early 2010s. I think I give them credit. So for a long time, you had Cliff Bars. Cliff Bars are great. Love Cliff Bars. You had Power Bars. Power Bars, not so much, right? And those
they were a little weird, a little sawdusty.
Along for gels. Yeah, very sawdusty. And ProBar was actually an energy bar that tasted good because it's real food. And I still, to this day, my dying day, I will say ProBar is the best energy food there is. I will eat it from just sitting around. Tastes delicious. The whole berry blast from ProBar is my favorite outdoor gear purchase under $100. Because if you're doing anything worthwhile outdoor, and you need to go buy gear, you need fuel, and you want to eat. You want to be able to have something that you want to eat. And the whole berry blend. There's whole strawberries in there, man. It's so good.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, go ProBar.
Cool. We'll link to that show notes. I'll have to get some. I haven't ever tried those. I don't think I probably have, but I don't remember.
Dude, there's so many energy bars now.
I know there is. Yeah, there is. That's probably one of the most oversaturated categories. But everybody's got a good idea. I mean, that makes sense.
Well, that's another industry thing that's kind of funny. So when I was there, I did the outdoor and sporting goods sales because we're still. This is 2010. I mean, it's still really looking at that. And then we had a natural foods guy who sold at the Whole Foods and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Because there was this person. I mean, there was still at that time, 12 years ago. Well, if you're selling it to a grocery store, you can't sell it also to a gear shop.
There was a little bit of that.
Right. That whole thing, right?
Right.
And I mean, that's gone.
Yeah, pretty much.
So now it's like sell to whoever you want.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you read a lot? What are some of your favorite books? Or do you listen to Audible, books on tape?
Probably like a lot of people don't read as much as I should. But two books I'd recommend. One's a classic and actually it's been on my mind lately because my daughter's going on a backpacking trip this summer. Is A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson.
That's a great book.
I've read that several times. So fun. And great if you're not familiar with backpacking. That's a great one. Probably though, currently, if I had to that's my all-time favorite book right now, and I've read it twice in the last 2 years, is West of Jesus by Stephen Kotler.
Yeah, he's good. Yeah.
Yeah, great story about his relationship with surfing. And I don't think you need to be a surfer to appreciate it, but definitely helps. And it's a really good one. What about movies though? What's your go-to outdoor movie?
Go-to movie, boy.
It has something to do with a future episode of Lairs.
Yeah. I don't know if I have a go-to movie. I always like to mix it up with movies. I'll reread books, but movies I rarely will go rewatch. Probably.
Yeah, go ahead.
Probably the go-to movie, and I'm going to blow the name of it. I can't remember the name of it, but it's the one. I'm going to mess this up. What's the one where they were climbing? I'm not even going to say because I'll blow it. I'll come up with something else.
Well, so the thing I like about outdoor movies is honestly, you can cut this out. I'm considering doing something movie related because I love movies.
No, I like it. I like it
on the show. But it's do you pull off the thing in the movie? So if it's an outdoor, like if you watch Cliffhanger, anybody who's rock climbing will be like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Most people don't notice those things. Like I lived in Boston, right? So when I hear bad Boston accents in movies, I'm like, what are you doing? That kind of thing. So I'm curious, like, what is there a movie where you feel like they nailed the outdoor stuff in the movie? Like, I think Point Break actually, as corny as it kind of is and wonderful as it is, I think the surfing's actually pretty good in Point Break.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it'd probably be more the story. And the one I was thinking about is Touching the Void. And it probably, I think it's so strong for me because I was in a cabin at Eagle Creek when we were the sponsor of the Banff Film Festival, and we'd go up to Banff every year for the festival and hang out with the filmmakers and whatnot. It was just an awesome experience. And I got to meet, I can't draw a blank on the guy that wrote the book, but he wrote the book, and we'd go skiing after the film festival in a hut, backcountry hut. So we'd go in for a couple of nights, ski around and hang out. And one night he told that story in the hut. And we just, the wind was howling outside. We had a little candle on the table, and it was just gripping. And then to read the book and see the movie on the screen was just, for me, just probably brings all the things in the outdoors home. I mean, life-threatening danger, big adventure. It was amazing. Great book.
Joe Simpson. Great.
Joe Simpson. Thank you.
My story of that is I read that book, loved it. Watching the movie while watching it at home, and if it's a certain time of night, anything on the television will put me to sleep, no matter how invested I am into it. Right? Even if I'm so thrilled. And my wife, who knew nothing about the story, we're watching the movie, and she is just on pins and needles, and I'm like out cold, and she yells at me. She's like, "How are you asleep right now?" She's so mad at me. Could not believe what she was watching. But,
that was amazing.
That's a great one.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Great one. Yeah, they nailed the outdoor stuff in that one for sure.
They did. Yeah, they kind of had to, because that was a big adventure. Yeah, and
sure.
Kind of unfortunate. But anyway, is there anything you'd like to say to our listeners as we wrap up here?
I'd like to say, please check out Layers, presented by Polartec. It's available wherever you get your podcasts, or you can go to layers.simplecast.com. Definitely subscribe, because production on season 2 has begun, like I mentioned. So more Layers coming, and you don't want to miss out when we eventually put up some new episodes. Right
on. Awesome. We'll be all over that. Where can people find you if they want to follow up? Email, Twitter?
Yeah, Instagram and Twitter at Rock Fight LLC. You can find me or Rock Fight on LinkedIn as well. It's Colin with 1 L, 2 L Collins or posers. But I was a poser too, so that's okay. And you can head to, as you did, to rockfightllc.com to drop me an email. Don't judge the website.
Cool.
It's still under development, but yeah.
Right on. Cool. Well, it's been great talking to you, Colin. I appreciate the time, and we'll do it again.
Rick, this was super fun. Thanks for having me on.
All right, have a good one.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Outdoor Biz Podcast. Be sure to visit our website, theoutdoorbizpodcast.com, where you'll find show notes with links to everything we talked about and more. Subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts so you'll never miss an episode. And while you're at it, if you found value in this show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes. Or spread the word and tell a friend about the show. That would really help us out too. Be sure to tune in every week. And thanks again for listening to the Outdoor Biz Podcast with Rick Saez.